We talked quite a bit about, these 100-year-old companies in niche markets, well-established, built-out markets, and the real growth opportunities for companies like Blackstone is through acquisition.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I've got Rich Milici, President and CEO of Blackstone Industries. Rich, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure, Rich. It's the Made in America podcast, so we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make? And why do you make it?
Great question. So Blackstone Industries, the answer is a little complicated. We have 5 different brands. So we make, under the Fordham brand, we make rotary power tools that are used in the jewelry manufacturing industry primarily. Under Handler Manufacturing, we make equipment and machinery used in dental labs. Under the Olson brand, we make bandsaw blades, scroll saw blades, coping saw blades. Under the Zona company, we make hobby tools, razor saws and pliers, tweezers. And under the Edge Finisher brand, we make a diamond edge polishing machine for polishing the edge of acrylic used in sign and point of purchase display type industries.
Lots of interesting stuff. And why do you do it?
Why do we do it? So I think our main reason why, and this will be a common theme probably through much of our conversation, is we provide the freedom to artisans to create. So our tools are designed so that they work when they get them, and they're allowed to focus on what they're doing, their artwork, their jewelry, their dental prosthetic, whatever it might be.
Their craftsmanship, yeah. It's really interesting, Rich. This is going to be, in my view, a real bit of a unique episode. So I'm really excited to talk about, the journey to creating this conglomerate, as it were, under this one theme that you mentioned and talked about, the idea of sort of empowering craftsmen to make their great stuff. I think the journey to get there is super interesting. Your growth and management story is also really interesting. So we got a lot of great stuff to cover. I do like to start off though. Let's kind of talk about sort of how we got here. Sure. You didn't found any of these businesses. No. You didn't do any of the work that the businesses did. You sort of came to it from a different way. So if you could just share with the audience sort of your background and how your journey took you to President and CEO of Blackstone.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an electrical engineer, and I have a management science degree in statistical process control. Worked at operating nuclear plants for the majority of my career up until about 2010. So a good 20 years working at an operating nuclear plant as a senior electrical design engineer, design supervisor. And then in 2005, I transitioned from the operating plant to the marketing company. So the company I worked for owned several deregulated nuclear assets in New England, and we were basically selling the output of the units into the deregulated utility market. So,
because prior to the deregulation, you only could sell it into the local utility. Is that?
Yeah, they were prior to deregulation. It was a typical utility, right? They had a cost-based rate structure, and there was no market per se for the electricity. But when they deregulated all the electricity markets, now the plants could bid their power based on the supply stack that was in the system, and they could bid their power into the market, and they would get whatever the market settled at. Each utility that was selected was paid that price. So base load generation, like a nuclear plant, has very low cost of production. Mm-hmm. So when the markets get set by a gas unit, for example, they get the gas price. So they're producing at a very low rate.
Yeah, pretty good for nuclear power.
Right. It's a great for low cost base load production. Yeah. So I was working.
So you just got out of. You were initially in sort of production and operation.
Yeah, I was in the operations side of the plant.
Yeah.
Maintaining the design basis, doing changes to the plant. Making
sure that our nuclear power plants don't go boom, basically.
Yeah, making sure, they're very safe, and making sure that the changes that we're doing to them are in line with their design basis.
So what made you decide to move out of sort of operations and into sort of the marketing sales side of it?
Yeah, so it was kind of a new area for what was going on in my company. And with the background of how the plant operates, I was brought in as like we were scheduling the output with the independent system operator. So I had the plant knowledge, I had the contacts back to the operations teams, and then learning the ISO interface was kind of, that was a good liaison between the two. So, and it was an interesting area of the business. So it was a nice change to kind of move in that direction.
Take advantage of that new opportunity.
Yeah. And, the company I was working for, they were expanding. They opened up an office in Stanford, created a whole marketing team, a corporate risk group. And we were really buying the output of all the units that they owned and then selling them separately into the markets. So it was really looked like a upcoming opportunity. They were like the revenue engine for this Northeast portion of their operation.
Good place to be in a position to help grow that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So then what happened?
So everything was great till about 2010. They made an attempt to spin off the units from the corporate utility. The investor groups weren't really thrilled with having this risky, deregulated arm tied into the utility, which had a strict rate base. And so, some of the public service commissions of the various states weren't too thrilled about that. And so that kind of just fell apart. And it was around 2010 when they made the decision to basically wrap that up and move the corporate risk group back to Houston. And, basically said, your job's in Houston if you want it. So, and that's kind of goes to my family was young and nobody was really interested in relocating to Houston. And so it was about that time that I started really focusing on, what can I do to kind of give myself the ability to make my own decisions as to where I'm living, where I'm raising my family, and those type of things. So that's when I went out and started looking for an opportunity, like a business to own and operate.
So you made the conscious decision, hey, I don't want to uproot. So here's an opportunity. Let me sort of be the master of my own future. Right. Instead of starting a business, find a business. How did you sort of go about that? I'm sure there's tons of people that think about it, but how did you put it to work?
Yeah. So it's something that I kind of always had in the back of my mind. I don't know that it certainly was never at the scale that it is. It's like, I should always maybe I'll own a liquor store or a gas station, right? Something that I could do on the side. But with this particular opportunity, I was coaching some kids in soccer. One of the fathers whose son was on the team, he had bought a business. He had done something similar, and he introduced me to the gentleman that helped him. So I worked with him, who was kind of his passion in life was to help people that were good managers, to help them find an opportunity that they otherwise couldn't necessarily contemplate finding. You know what I mean? He had a method, he had a model to do that, and so I started working with him, and he identified a business, several businesses, and he would look at them and evaluate them, and then only present me with opportunities that thought would be a good fit, and that's kind of where it went. So for a period of almost 2 years was building a relationship with the prior ownership of Blackstone. It's because when you're buying somebody's life work, it's important to them that there's a trust and a level of comfort that you're going to take and continue on with what they've built and spent their whole life building, right? So the start of it is huge in how you build that relationship and trust. So
that's really interesting. Yeah. So I know this wasn't your business, so I'll ask the question anyway. Do you remember, you said he had sort of like a model or a system to help you find the business. Do you remember sort of the intricacies of that? Like, was it sort of an interview you, Rich, to figure out what type of business you'd be good at and then sort of match you up? I won't go too deep on it, but just curious if you sort of remember.
I think the process, certainly from my perspective, it was, I think in the beginning, I certainly had a mindset of, I want it to be something that I'm interested in, but looking back at it now, I'm more agnostic to what the business is. It's this just so happens Blackstone is tools and woodworking and working with your hands and stuff like that, and artisans, the craftsman side of things, and that is something that I'm very interested in.
Exactly.
I like to woodwork. I like to do those type of things. So, and I'm fascinated by the people that are professionals at it. It's pretty fascinating. But looking back now, I think from a business perspective, I am really kind of agnostic as to the business. Not being a founder, I think that's kind of why. I'm looking for businesses that can create value and are good businesses, well-run businesses.
So when you found this business, I guess it was a well-run business with a good history.
Yep.
How did you go about sort of building the relationship with the owner? I mean, you said it went on for 2 years. Were you working there for 2 years?
No. So my partner that helped me find the business, he had done all the upfront financial analysis on the business and really only introduced me even to the previous owner once they had gotten to a point where it thought it was a viable opportunity. And really, so it's kind of a few lunches and meetings with the owner, talking about what my plans are for the business, talking about my background, how he thought that might fit. And just really a lot of back and forth on that, and all the while the due diligence is going on in the background, right? But it's, every couple of months you're meeting with them. So it just takes time. It's not like we were, meeting weekly and doing these things. It's.
And so were you working at the old company in the
I was still working at the operating plant, or at the marketing side, yeah.
So it took 2 years from introduction to
I think
close.
from when when the first emails went out about the opportunity to when we closed, which was on October 31st of 2013. That's when we closed.
Coming up on 10-year anniversary here in a few weeks there.
Absolutely.
On Halloween, auspicious beginning.
Yeah.
So when you first started kind of getting introduced, not knowing, I assume you didn't know too much.
I didn't even know the name of the business.
Yeah. Or even the industry itself, probably. I mean, obviously people make these tools, but you probably didn't know anything about it. So how did you get yourself sort of comfortable just in your own skin saying, I don't really know how this business works. I don't know anything about it, but you're going to take a flyer on, putting your name on the line, investing some real capital into it, to kind of run it. What was sort of that process like, and how did you kind of get comfortable with the idea?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess once the opportunity was presented to me, then it was just, constant research online, trying to find out as much as I could about business, even before I met the ownership, right? It was, it's a jewelry tool manufacturer in Bethel, Connecticut, right? So, and then I'm just scrambling around, and there's a couple of companies actually in Connecticut that are in the jewelry business, one on the tool side, us, and one on the distribution side. And really just kind of poring over the information that I could get on the website about the company, about what their products are. But really, it's almost, until I got in there, really, it's hard to really understand the entire business and what they're doing. A lot of that was covered in the due diligence period by my partner and stuff like that. So,
Well, what about just sort of the idea of like the business process? Obviously you'd been in operations, you've been in marketing to some extent, but there's just so much people got to get comfortable in terms of like running and owning a new business, right? What is the projection of the business? You're buying the business, so you're paying, I presume, more than 1 year's worth of profit. So you're counting on growing the business. You got to understand how to manage the people, hire the people. Like there's so many things. Did you spend a lot of time getting into those weeds of it? Were you more sort of at the high level?
I was certainly analyzing, looking at the financials, and evaluating, the projected growth. The nice thing about 100-year-old manufacturing companies with a long operating history, we had financials and information back to like 1998 and beyond that. But, you had a 15, 20-year run with steady revenue, steady profitability, surviving downturns in the economy. So it's, the idea behind what I'll call a leveraged buyout is, right, you buy good companies that are stable. You're not looking for an internet company that's growing at 25% a year. You're saying, okay, this is a stable company. It can handle the leverage that you're going to put on it to buy it, and it's going to pay down its debt, and 10 years, 20 years from now, you have a valuable asset with virtually no debt, right? And with the ability to make other decisions, right?
And that was sort of the plan. So when you bought the business, it didn't have all 5 of the companies that were part of it today.
Correct.
So as you bought it, and we're maybe jumping ahead a little bit here, but sounds like one of your strategies for growth from the beginning to do sort of tangential acquisitions to help build sort of Blackstone Industries into what you've got today? Yeah. Or did that kind of come up after the fact?
I mean, I think, again, looking back now, like one of the things I enjoy the most about the business is the deal, right? The M&A part of the whole process. That to me is the most exciting. Outside of that, it becomes, it's a job, right? I'm the president of the company. I have a job. I have daily things that I have to do and whatnot. But when I'm involved in looking or evaluating potential opportunities, that's kind of what gets me excited. So I think it was once I got comfortable after the first couple of years. Yeah, absolutely. I was looking for additional ways to add additional companies, divisions, whatever it might be, and so I'm always looking at potential additional opportunities, and I think we talked quite a bit about these 100-year-old companies in niche markets, well-established, built-out markets, and the real growth opportunities for companies like Blackstone is through acquisition.
So let's talk about that. I think I may be shortchanged because we had talked about it kind of off camera or off microphone. But talk a little bit about your thought process. So you get in the business. Again, it's a long 100-year-old business, so it's got stability. It's in a niche market. Maybe a mature market would be a good way to say it. So probably not a lot of new entrants, but also probably not a lot of massive growth opportunities because it just sort of is what it is. Right. So at some point you realize, hey, if I want to grow, I got to do it like a different way. So maybe walk us through sort of that thought process and where you ended on that.
Yeah, sure. So growth it's really only going to come a couple of ways with those type of companies. It's going to be through new product development, right, which we do, or through acquisition. So the jewelry, I'll focus a little bit on the largest division, Fordham, and even the handler division, which is in the dental side. Those two markets are very similar. They have some crossover in their products. They have some crossover in the use of their products. So, a dental technician that's making a dental prosthetic is doing the same grinding, polishing, deburring on dental apparatus as a jeweler is on fine jewelry.
And they're probably actually similar size
similar
profiles.
Skill sets, similar, right? So in those industries, there's a lot of family businesses, small, say sub $10 million companies that are out there doing, who's making this specialty tool or this material or whatnot. So there's a lot of exposure to companies like that. And a lot of them, similar to the Blackstone owner, were at a point where they were at a point where an exit was, obviously in their near future. And
just because they've been at it for so long.
Yeah, either they were the founders and they didn't have an exit strategy, no one to hand it off to, or they were second generation and they were just ready to do something different. But there's a lot of companies out there in those markets that are in those situations, and by my first couple of years through the trade show circuits and meeting vendors and meeting all these companies and at every trade show around the world, you start to build relationships with them, and they know the previous owner, and they're talking to him like, how did you get out of the business? Who's this guy, Rich or whatever? And so I met a lot of companies that had potential, and actually, that's how the fifth division was added. I had met the previous owner at a trade show, and kind of just sent him an email one day saying, hey, if you're ever interested, I'd be interested.
And he said, yeah, I am interested, and there we go.
Right. And then it's, again, built the relationship a little bit more, and same process. At least that's been my experience. I'm not a M&A guy that's been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, you seem like you've actually gotten pretty handy at it,
I mean, it's worked. What I learned from my partner and in the first go round with Blackstone, and has proven well so far.
So when you look at like Handler, which is like mostly the dental lab tools and so forth, you're acquiring other dental lab tool businesses and sort of folding their book of business into yours. Is that?
So I mean, that's what I did with Handler, right? That's why I brought. So they have common product. Their most common products are with the Fordham line, right? Because they're doing similar things in the dental market. So, and Fordham actually, has some revenue sales into the dental lab market as well, just not nearly to the depth that Handler did. So when I looked at it, it was like, all right, Fordham's 7 to 10% of its sales are into the dental lab market, and Handler's like 95%, right? So wouldn't it be great to broaden that penetration into the dental lab market and then have some crossover capabilities between products and customers? We had common customers, common suppliers. So the idea was to expand that horizontally.
And then are you also involved in sort of the organic growth, sales, and customer retention? Because I assume in addition to the acquisitive growth, you're still trying to make sure that the inherent businesses are growing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we're, it's really the function of managing the existing stuff for, 4 of the 5 divisions sell wholesale, right? So it's really an account management process, right? You're taking care of your big dealers, making sure you're in touch with them on a regular basis and making sure that they have your products up on their website. And, really, again, it's an account management function. It's keeping that relationship in a good place. Yeah.
And as you've grown on, how did you get into the Zona brand, or how did you sort of fold that in? It didn't seem like an obvious connection, but at some point you thought a different approach.
Yeah. So again, in 2013, 4 of the 5 brands were there, right? Okay. So Fordham, Olson, Zona, and Edge Finisher were part of Blackstone. They came along, here's kind of the background story. So Fordham moved up to Bethel, Connecticut in 1956 into the current building that we're in now. And in 1976 timeframe, previous ownership acquired the Olson Saw Company, moved that up out of, I believe they were in Long Island, moved them up to Bethel. Ran those 2 divisions for a while. There was a couple of small divisions that came and went. But in 1996, they added the Zona tool division. And the reason that made sense was Olson was making the saw stock for Zona's razor saws. Right? So we were just toothing raw steel, cutting it up and sending it to Zona tool for them to make their saws. Yeah. And when they were apparently they were ready to exit out in 96, and the previous ownership said, "Oh, well, we might as well just buy it. We're making the saw stock anyways."
Exactly, right?
So they bought Zona Tool, brought that into Blackstone, and then right around that same time they acquired Edge Finisher. Now that's the one that's that's the one that kind of sticks out. Yeah. It sells to end users. It's manufactured machinery for polishing the edge of acrylic. Doesn't really relate to, yeah. So it's a little different division. It's a small division. But it helps with the diversification of the markets that we're in, and it's an interesting industry, the sign industry. It's actually quite a large market.
Yeah, you're working on that. So as you look to the future, what types of businesses would you look to acquire? I mean, I assume that it continues to be part of your growth strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm always looking for deal flow and looking at various businesses. I probably looked at 20 businesses this year, and it can be anything complementary to our capabilities. So we make lab furniture, for example. We're doing a lot of sheet metal stuff. So I've looked at sheet metal companies. We always looking at any niche jewelry type of companies that are manufacturing specialty tools or whatnot in that market. On the dental side, it could be companies that have consumable products that go into the dental market, whether it be materials or chemicals and stuff like that. Consumables are great, and also on the equipment and machinery side, whether it would be interesting for a more technologically advanced company, to get both dental and jewelry are moving in the direction of 3D printing and intraoral scanning for dental. And so, it would be difficult for a company like mine to innovate on something like that. So to be able to partner or acquire something in that space would, give us a new channel to focus on.
Sort of tangential. So you mean you looked at?
So I'm looking up and sideways.
Sideways, sort of sticking similar type of manufacturing and also in the industries that you're in. How do you think about trying to source opportunities? You said you looked at 20 opportunities. Like how when you're out there trying to source, how do you do it?
Yeah, there are some M&A advisors have deal listings on their websites. So there's that. Through networking, I belong to a Vistage group. There's opportunities that come out through that. trade shows, being at trade shows, being out in the marketplace and listening to what companies are thinking about selling or whatnot. Yeah, I mean, those are the primary ways. There's always the option too to sign on with an M&A guy that are going out and actively searching for you to do it. But for me, my experience has always been kind of a more direct approach with the owner and stuff. So I'm more comfortable with that.
Yeah, charge it more like a retail approach.
Yeah, because the buyer sell side firms out there, they want to run a pretty strict process. They're like, all right, you have 2 weeks. I need an LOI. I need an answer by Tuesday.
Right. And
yeah, it's a little more personal than that. So
you like kind of grown that organic approach a little bit more.
Yeah.
And people seem to appreciate that in these smaller, closely held businesses.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. A lot of times they don't. They prefer not to work with.
When you think about kind of integrating some different businesses and maximizing them, do you guys try and leverage like some type of business process or approach? I know you mentioned Vistage.
Yep.
So a lot of times kind of working through that, sometimes like EOS or something like that. You guys ever buy into any of that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So we run the company on EOS now, have been for about 2 years. And it's definitely helped us immensely. I have a great leadership team, and EOS has helped us put structure around what we do, everything from meetings to how we run our day-to-day, the language that we speak, how we communicate to each other, how we solve problems, how we keep track of problems. All that stuff it's a great tool. And it came about really when we brought on the handler division in 2018. We went from about 60 people to about 80 people. And then we went through COVID period, right? So, but once Handler got up to Bethel in 2021, we relocated them up to Bethel. We started with the whole idea that, hey, we're going to run Blackstone as a family, right, of brands, and Handler was going to be another one. It was originally bought independently, right? So it was brought up here in 2021. It was made a wholly owned subsidiary of Blackstone at the end of 2021. And during the 2021 timeframe up through 2022, we implemented a common ERP platform. So we put all the companies on NetSuite. Mm-hmm. So now they're in close proximity, not in the same building, but close. We have a common computer platform that we run the business accounting and the manufacturing software. Common platform for that. So now everybody at any location, anywhere can see all the information from all the companies. So the next step was, all right, so how do we now manage this conglomerate of brands with common leadership and a common language and a common process across the 2 locations, across the 5 brands. Mm-hmm. So, and EOS was instrumental in that. In setting that up. It was the next logical step for us, is the next tool that we needed to really do that efficiently.
So, I mean, as for those that don't know, EOS really came out of this Gino Wickman Traction book. Right. It really introduced Entrepreneurial Operating System, I think is what it stands for. Right. And so the concept is put together like the same way you would think about developing a process for manufacturing anything, like a tool that's sort of a defined process.
Right.
EOS essentially takes the same approach, I would say, to defining management processes.
Absolutely.
Right. Fair enough. So did you start off saying, hey, I've now got all my companies on one ERP, like you mentioned, we've got them kind of near each other, and then I got to find a system to run? Or was it more like you heard about EOS and then connected, hey, I could use that here?
Yeah. So I think, EOS kind of plays to my engineering side and the nuclear plant, right? Yeah. I mean, at the operating nuclear plant, everything had a process. You had a procedure for everything, right? Everything was documented, and how you do this, how you do that, right? So it kind of, and I never wanted to, bring and impose that level of rigor from a process perspective to a small manufacturing company that was used to just like, hey, I got to do this today, that tomorrow. So, but as we got to 80 people, and 2 locations, you could almost feel like, all right, the wheels are coming off the bus, right? It's like there's too much going on in too many different directions.
Do you remember the signs? Because I think this would be interesting for people that run the business to understand, like, what are those? What were some of like this? Do you remember any like sort of?
I mean, it could be something as simple as, you can start to see your on-time delivery slipping. You can start to see errors being made in certain areas, or thinking you solved a problem, but it really, comes back 2 weeks later and the same issue shows up again and again and again. And, issues not being tracked. So, the whole organization is not aware of things going on that are important. So you start to get a feel for that going on. And, and then you have a workforce that, is going to be transitioning, right? You have an aging workforce there. So, how do you transfer that information, that tribal knowledge to the next? How are you prepared to transfer that information to the next group of people? So, do you have it documented and all those type of things? So you start to go, like, man, we need some type of structure around how we document, how we do things, and then how we do our day to day. And all that stuff. So, and those are the tools. And again, it was a comfort area for me coming out of nuclear power. Not so much necessarily for a lot of other
for
people.
The team.
But the first part of that is getting your leadership team to embrace that, and they have. And I think it's done a lot of great things already for the organization.
How did you kind of go about? You get the idea. How did you go about getting the team on board?
So we went to, I'll go back to answer your question that I didn't answer, I think. But, so EOS was, I had heard about it. They were doing a big marketing campaign over the past couple of years. So I had heard about it there. I had read some of Gino Wickman's books, and it came up in Vistage a few times as well. So that's kind of where we settled on EOS. But in order to get the leadership buy-in, it was more of, hey, this is a interesting program, maybe we should consider doing this. And so we agreed to a 90-minute sit down with my leadership team, just to they have a 90-minute where they'll introduce all the concepts. This is what you do. This is what the process looks like going forward. And so we went to that session run by a mediator for EOS, a licensed mediator. And we came away from that and discussed it internally as to whether or not we thought it was something that we could use and really embrace. So that's
and so did you get that to the person from EOS or the coach or implementer?
The
or whatever?
Yeah.
Did they really walk you through the whole process to get it off the ground?
Oh yeah. So after that 90-minute session, once we signed up, then you go for a full day session, right? Or two days in a row where you're building out soup to nuts from the beginning. You're starting at your core values, your purpose, then moving down to your accountability chart, and setting the leadership team's accountability chart, which is an interesting process, right? You're sitting around the table with the people you expect to be on your leadership team, but really you're just drawing boxes and responsibilities. And then you're saying, all right, who belongs in that seat? Look around the table. All right. Joe belongs in that seat. Really? Does Joe get it?
Right.
So it's like, are there enough boxes for everyone around the table?
And how did that work out?
Yeah, it worked out. It worked out well. We, we had the right people there, although we have made a change in one of the boxes for the better. And that's kind of, that process forces you to do that, which is, it's, if I could tell anyone thinking about EOS, you got to be prepared that, you're going to be making some tough decisions potentially with the process for sure.
Those decisions, tough decisions that kind of got to be made if you want to get where you want to go.
Yeah. Yep. It's all about the right person in the right seat. And sometimes you have the right person, but they're in the wrong seat. Sometimes you have the wrong person
altogether.
There's no seat.
Yeah, exactly. How quickly did you, for people that think about something like this, how long after you start making the investment in time did you feel, maybe feel's the wrong word. Well, maybe I'll start with feel the business getting better? You talked about sort of, you could feel, I don't know if you said the wheels coming off or whatever you said, right. But I sort of envisioned as you were talking, like, you're in your business, you're growing, and so you're driving the bus, whatever, it feels good. Then all of a sudden you like sort of feel a little play in the wheel. You like,
starts to
like
rattle.
It's not, yeah, right. Exactly. It starts to rattle. So you were feeling some of that, and probably like most business owners, we sort of keep going. It'll probably solve itself, or to your extent, you try a few things and you think the problem's solved, but it keeps coming back. And if the business still grows, it probably gets even a little bit more rickety. How soon after starting this implementation process did you feel that it was getting better?
So we started just with the leadership team, really trying to, because we had to learn it, right? If we were going to roll it out downstream from us, then we really needed to learn it. And I would say it probably wouldn't have been until after our second quarterly review. So the way
like 6 months, basically.
Yeah. So we had the first 2 sessions, then we went away, then we came back for our first quarterly review, where you review all of the rocks that that you had for the last quarter. How did you do? A review of your financials and stuff like that. And you go away again for another quarter, and then you come back. So after the second one with the implementer, really walking us through it, how to think about what we accomplished, think about what our rocks are for the next quarter, how do they relate to what our goals are, in our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, or 10-year plan. And really helps you learn how to set good goals, good rocks, how to process issues. So it's, I think we're still learning, don't get me wrong, but I think after the second quarter is when we started to feel like, hey, we can do this. We use a tool called Bloom Growth now. It used to be Traction Tools to track everything. So that makes it very helpful. You have your scorecard in there, your VTO is in there, your accountability charts in there. So everything's available electronically for everyone to see. It's all tracked electronically. So that tool helped us quite a bit. And, we're set to go in November to do an annual review for our first full annual review, where we'll set the entire next year. We'll reset the Vision Traction Organizer, move out our 3-year and 5-year and ultimate 10-year goals, and kind of reset everything from where we're at. But yeah, I would say after that second quarter, we felt comfortable that we could take this forward and roll it out slowly to each level of the organization.
So you're 6 months in, you're feeling like, hey, this is going to work.
Yep.
How much past that where you started to feel like, hey, the bus is feeling a little bit less rickety?
Yeah, I think what I experienced is one of the biggest benefits, I think, as we started getting, so the term they use is these level 10 meetings, right? So that's what, at each level, you're having level 10 meetings with your organization once a week and processing issues that are occurring. And as we rolled out the L10 meetings to the lower levels of the organization, you could see that it opened up an opportunity for people that may not necessarily have had a voice that was heard previously to bring up issues that are going on in their department that they may have been bringing up for years, and nobody was really listening, or it just, they stopped bringing them up or whatever. So it provides an avenue for that. And I think with that, you could feel the organization changing, right? We're speaking a kind of a common language. We're talking about issues. So when someone comes to you with a problem, did you put it on an issue in your L10? There's no longer do you have to solve their problem, right? All right, put it on an issue, talk about it at your engineering L10 or talk about it at the ops L10.
So creating a framework for these underlying issues to get addressed and solved.
And the other thing I think it did is, my leadership team and I talk about this all the time, is when we're talking about if we have an employee issue or if we're talking really any issue, the first place to start is core values, right? Because they're a perfect way to direct the conversation back to, because that's what we're saying we're living by these, right? So, if it's a willingness to learn is one of our core values, right? And if you're having a conversation with someone, and that's a clear example where they're just not willing to learn, you have that conversation, but you have a foundation to have it. Right? You have something to stand behind you, like we said we were this. This is who we are. Right. And, so it really I think it gives the leadership team, it gives supervisors, gives managers a tool to have those conversations, which sometimes are difficult.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah.
And so it took you 6 months to commit, a little bit later to feel that once you rolled it out to the company. How quickly do you start seeing it in the financial results?
Good question. I think that we've already seen it in a lot of areas. More, not so much on the top line, but probably bottom line or the expense line. You've seen it there where there's more focus on things that we can do better internally. We're solving issues that we let drag on in the past, maybe. becoming more efficient, better on-time delivery. All that stuff has improved drastically. So, the top line stuff, we have things that we haven't had in the past that are going to drive that are, marketing strategies, marketing plans. Old manufacturers, what is marketing? they don't even know what marketing is. Everyone knows our products.
Right, exactly.
So we have full marketing plans. We know who our customer is. It's documented who we believe our customer is, and we are actively pursuing that pretty robustly too.
So now you're coming up on 10 years as a business owner. And looking back on the decision to make the jump and do the journey, and just in our conversations before and now, I can see you've been through a lot of what those of us that have been at this for a while have been through.
Right.
How do you think about good decision, great decision? You like the role, happy with what you did, lessons learned? Like, what do you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's absolutely was the right decision, the best decision. It was kind of an all-in decision too.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I had a good job. I could have had a good job in Houston too and they're still doing fine. So, but it was definitely absolutely the right decision for me. Back to that whole freedom line of thinking is like, it really did give me the freedom to live where I wanted to live and, control what my work life was like and the experience of, I didn't own a business before this. So the whole experience, it's been 10 years of learning every day, nonstop. I wasn't an M&A person, sure I had the math background and whatnot to understand all that stuff, but I had to learn it all. And so it's, that's great. I love learning, love reading. So yeah, best decision.
Best decision you made.
Yeah.
I'm glad we brought that up because I think there's just, number one, I don't know if people understand that just with the retiring baby boomers and where we are, the biggest amount of opportunity to sort of get in and buy a business and do what you did, it's better now than it's ever been. And I think some people feel like the only opportunity to own a business is to start it. And that can be extremely daunting. It's nice to buy one already in progress, though, of course, to your point, it's all in because you put a lot of things on the line to make it happen. But you're able to get sounds like a little piece of what I would really call like the American dream, right? The ability to kind of control your own destiny and make a difference.
Yep. I think so.
That's really cool. Yeah. Well, it's been a great story, Rich. I'm gonna ask you a few last questions, and
sure.
we'll wrap it up. So I like to ask people, if you had to do something other than be the president and CEO of Blackstone Industries, and it could be anything in the whole wide world, what would you do to spend your time?
So I think it would be. I think it would be something on the creative side, right? So I had this engineer in me that. Very have this structured side
ones
of me
and zeros, as it were. Yeah.
Right. But I'm fascinated, like I said, with the people that use our tools, or the jewelry makers, the jewelers, even the dental technicians that are creating prosthetics, the woodworkers that are using our stuff. So, I enjoy doing some of that stuff on the side, but really don't have the time to dedicate to it. So I think it would be something in the maker area per se. So something on the creative side, and but ideally, I think I'd be playing guitar somewhere.
There it is.
At a local bar every Friday night.
There you go. Well, that could happen.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite business book?
So excellent question. I mean, I do read, most of the time I read via Audible just because I'm driving a lot.
That's fair, that counts.
Yeah. So I recently read a series of books by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And they're The Gap and the Gain, Who Not How, and 10X is Easier Than 2X. Great. Highly recommend the books. And I'll give you a brief synopsis of what their theme is. So The Gap and the Gain, a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, they're always focused on getting to some level in the futures, whether it's 10 million, 20 million, whatever it might be, right? And they're always measuring themselves about, did they get there, right? And versus saying, let's look back where I was 2 years ago and how far have I come, right? It's a measurement of success. So looking back and seeing how far you've come, that's a gain mentality. And looking forward and seeing how far you missed your target by, that's a gap mentality. So that's kind of the theme behind The Gap and the Gain. Who, not how. This is a great one, I think. So again, with the leadership team, you're always talking about, how can I do this? How do I build a marketing strategy? How can I, innovate, get into digital technology with my company? And we're always asking ourselves how, instead of saying, well, who could help me do that, right? So you don't have to be the one that knows how to do everything, right? So sometimes the better question to ask yourself is, who can help us get to that point, right? So that's kind of a theme behind the who, not how. And then 10x is easier than 2x. Is perfect for manufacturers, right? So everyone wants to grow their business, right? In 2 times. I'm gonna double my business next year, right? So if I'm making 1,000 widgets this year, next year I got to make 2,000, right? So I got to work twice as hard. I got to do, everything's twice as hard. And the reality of it is, it's a lot of work to grow 2 times. And the concept of being, that 10x is easier is that there aren't a lot of ways to multiply your business 10 times, right? There's probably no way of what you're doing now to grow your business 10 times. So it forces you to think outside the box and think like, change a strategy completely or focus in a totally different area than you've even thought of, because to get to 10 times, there's only maybe 1 or 2 paths. To get to 2 times, there's a million paths. So great series of books, very, it's a chapter and then a dialogue between the 2 authors. So it's a really good read.
That sounds super interesting. I'm going to pick that up.
Cool.
Rich, what's something that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
I guess, just hard work from my parents. They both worked hard, and, didn't necessarily have to ask me to work hard, just kind of, demonstrated it. You know what I mean?
No, I absolutely do know. What's something, Rich, that you learned later in your career, later in your life, that if you go back and told young Rich, and if he'd listened to you, it would have a real positive impact on his life?
I guess, just believe in yourself. Yeah.
That was something
Trust.
that you think you could have used a little more self-confidence and belief.
Yeah.
What ended
Trust.
up helping you find that self-confidence later in your life?
I guess, the willingness to take the chances on things and follow through and watching them succeed. Yeah.
Nothing builds on success like
Right.
success, like the gap in the gain.
Right.
Rich, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's been super interesting, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate it, Ari. Thanks for having me.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.